Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. This is episode 210. If you're joining us on YouTube, we're going to talk about some upcoming events in our area. We're going to talk about a little bit about some of the things that are contributing to Warzone Atlanta, and we're going to talk about the list you can expect to see in these 5 rounds or more tournaments. I mean, as more codexes are released, we are starting to see things develop, but still things are getting taken directly out of the index and out of the Forge World indexes. And we're going to talk about things that we have seen and certainly things that you can expect to see. After we do this segment, we're going to come back for another segment and then come in with Finishing Moves, the hobby segment. I'm joined tonight by Horton Doughton.
Yo.
Chris Morgan and Ricky Addington.
Magic Blood Cup.
ShadeSpire is great.
And Andrew Whitaker.
Still on a word limit.
We are going to talk a little bit about ShadeSpire and Total War. We have, just kind of like a hobby infusion, Warhammer addicts that we are, playing all these types of games.
If it says Warhammer on it, one of us is going to be playing it, so we might as well talk about it.
Some will play longer than others, but
man,
yes.
Speaking of that, did y'all see the announcement about World of Tanks? You can play a Predator in World of Tanks now. Games Workshop.
Yeah, it's in development. Yeah,
it's in development. Oh man, that is so exciting. It's gonna be awesome.
This might be the gateway that gets me to actually hang out online with my coworker who is all about some World of Tanks, but I refuse to get on there and play with her because I'm busy. But I mean, if I'm going to be able to build, if I'm going to be able to show her, whatever World War II era tank she's driving around in with a Land Raider, I'm going to do that.
World of Tanks is a really, really fun game, and the collaboration's super exciting. And anytime you can kind of mash mainstream popularity with 40K, which I always forget that we always think of 40K as a really small insular hobby with this niche group. Low key, they have 480 independent retailers worldwide. They are a incredibly powerfully traded public company on the English Stock Exchange, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of players. It's not that small. It's actually Warhammer is really a big deal.
It's huge, and it's not even just the tabletop game, the miniatures game that we play. I mean, I was at work one day and I'm sitting there and this guy is reading some of the Horus Heresy books and we get to talking about it and everything. I was like, so, what army do you play? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, Warhammer, what army do you play? He said, what do you mean? And I was like, the game. And he's like, it's a game? He didn't even know. He's read he's 10 deep into the Horus Heresy series. He didn't even know.
That's the beauty of some of this licensing. I mean, what we're talking about is licensing this amazing intellectual property to get it out there and expose to different people and to still be a part of it. The events I want to talk about coming up, though, Vendetta Games. It's in Dahlonega, Georgia. You can find, they have a website where they sell hobby stuff. It's vendetta.games.net. This weekend, you'll be hearing this on October 14th? Yeah.
Something to that effect.
You'll be hearing this on the 12th or 13th, but on October 14th, they will be having a 3-round RTT where the winner receives a ticket to Warzone Atlanta. So if you're in that area or anywhere near that area and you feel like you're too deep on the wait list, but you want to come to the event, you should definitely check them out and see about winning that game. We're going to have some local folks from Atlanta up there. Dahlonega is not really near Atlanta, but it's worth making the trip, and I know a lot of us do.
I mean, I'm planning on playing in it. It's a good 50 miles. No, you're not that far, but it's a good 45, 50 miles from Atlanta. So you're looking at an hour trip straight up one of the main highways here. But
it's accessible from other places too, like Tennessee, South Carolina. It's accessible.
Yeah, it's kind of a regional shop to be sure, and ultimately driving an hour in Atlanta is, sometimes I can go 2 miles and it takes me an hour because welcome to Atlanta. It's definitely going to be a fun time. Vendetta's a great venue, and I know, then the guys running the event are, of course, from the general staff, who are the co-hosts of Warzone Atlanta and my gaming club. Great guys, really fun missions. They're playing the Warzone missions. It's basically a Warzone prep tournament in and of itself. The ticket, however, it's kind of the Willy Wonka situation where you can kind of, if you go and play, you can win your way in, and that's pretty exciting. I know a buddy of mine who really, really wants to play at Warzone, but who didn't get a ticket, is sitting on the wait list right now, is driving up from Savannah, and he's like, I'm going to win my way in. Plenty of great competition.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, that's such a cool concept to give away a ticket for winning one of those tournaments. I think it would be really cool if there were more of those in future years. I would certainly be interested in running a tournament like that. But again, just a great concept.
Yeah, in the future, especially if we grow the event and have more tickets available, we can do this kind of thing with more shops and more events. But the owner of the store bought a ticket, and we thought it'd be cool if he did it. He dealt dealt with the ticket in this way. So that's why he has one available for that. It's very cool. I'm interested to see how this comes out, and if people are going to travel to it, you're going, even if you don't win the ticket, you're still going to be at a cool shop with cool people playing Warhammer, for the Saturday.
A good call.
Yeah, it sounds like a safe bet for a good time.
The other event happening, this is more local to us here in Marietta, is another one of our sponsors is having their 10-year anniversary as a store. This is the Gigabytes Cafe. This is my local store where it's Gigabytes, like BITES, like because they serve sandwiches there and now they serve beer. This is where we're going to be hosting the Valentine's Day Massacre in February, the 3-man tournament. But they're having their 10-year anniversary and they're going to be having some gaming events going on there. It's not going to be a 40K tournament, but they're going to have things like a swap meet and other types of gaming events to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. The guy that runs it is an awesome dude. Real credit to the area and the hobby in general. And I'm going to try to stop by there if I can.
Also, don't forget, I think the East Tennessee Adepticus will be having a tournament coming up in the next 2 weeks. They're doing a memorial tournament for one of their players who passed away. So if you're in the Knoxville area in 2 weeks, definitely try to get up to that one as well.
And on the other side of the country, Chris Morgan, you have an event you'd like to talk about also.
That's right. We have an event we're doing up here in Utah called War Games for Warriors. It's a charity fundraiser event that we're doing for some local veterans charities. Basically what the charity does, and I'll post up on Facebook with the link to the event and the info about it, but the charity pays for families of veterans who are in hospitals to go and stay there. Or stay at the hospital without having to, pay out of pocket pays to fly them out, things like that. So we're doing some of that. We're going to be doing some 24-hour streaming. There's a bunch of different ways that you can contribute to the charity. It's a really neat event. I'm very excited for it coming up on November 4th. If you guys want some more info about that, I will post that up on Facebook. There's going to be ways to sponsor players, so you could donate, like, say, $1 per battle point a player earns. Stuff like that. We're really hoping that it's gonna pan out and be a great event. I'm donating a Skitarii starter box that I'm doing a full paint job on, and it's going to be auctioned off starting at the value of the box. So you could, even if you're, say, remote and you want to auction or you're participating in one of the auctions for this, you could buy a fully painted Skitarii starter with the starting price, starting at what it would cost to have an unassembled and unpainted one. It's going to be really exciting.
My hat's off to you. That really sounds like a great event.
Awesome. I'll put links to these in the show notes. And so if you get this through a distribution network that you don't see the article, you can check it out on forgenarrative.net or on Bowls. I will put all these links to these events in the show notes. Some cool things that are coming up soon, especially for pre-order, ShadeSpire. I know this is a 40K podcast for the most part, but we do, delve deep into some of this other stuff. And ShadeSpire, I did a quick review on our YouTube channel, the Forge Narrative YouTube channel. But now more of us have played the game. And Ricky, I think you got to play your first game just a couple hours ago. What did you think?
My wife and I were just sitting in the floor playing in the living room. We loved it. I can't get my wife to play any games, but she's actually willing to give it another shot. So she must have really liked it. But I liked it a lot. It took us probably 20 minutes to kind of get the gist of the rules, and then we played through it. And I like all the different aspects of it. I had a lot of fun playing it. So I think it's going to be one of those games that really kind of grows as you play it, because it's with the different models that they're going to be able to introduce, the war bands, the cards, and all the ways you can customize how your war band fights another one is going to be a lot of fun to see what people do with it. But it was very easy to pick up and play, and it plays fast, so I'm pretty excited about it.
I'm glad you brought up your wife in this, because a lot of the reviews that I've seen so far kind of herald ShadeSpire as being a gateway game. And I think that if you get someone into ShadeSpire that is not necessarily a war gamer to begin with, you're kind of going to be setting yourself up kind of falsely thinking they're going to maybe jump into the war game band. I don't know if that's the case, but I think they will appreciate ShadeSpire as being an awesome strategy game itself.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of guys locally who don't really want to jump into war, like to Age of Sigmar or 40K or take that big step. but they're coming from X-Wing, which is kind of sort of, I don't really follow it a lot anymore, but it seems to have kind of floundered a little lately and just kind of died out locally. And they're looking at ShadeSpire as being kind of their next big thing to play at tournaments and stuff. So,
I hadn't thought about that, but you've got some miniatures, you've got a board, you've got some cards. That's all the components of X-Wing.
Yeah.
Well, plus
and
dice.
I think, well, and it's kind of neat because it's almost like, it's really hard to describe. Somebody was asking me how to describe it. And I was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a skirmish game with Magic the Gathering on top of it almost, because X-Wing, you've got your cards, but you know how that's going to play out pretty much. You set your cards up and everything. But with ShadeSpire, with you drawing cards each turn to see kind of what special abilities you get, there's that deck building aspect to it where you really need to get into it and decide how you want to play. You and your opponent could be playing the exact same warband, but depending on how you set those cards up, you could be playing wildly different strategies.
You have 20 cards that have to be unique, and then you draw a certain amount of them at the beginning of the game. And how you empty your hand and refresh your hand are all part of the action economy of the game. I could be misusing that term, but action economy is how I refer to it, to where it matters. And then, but you can only have, the cards have to be unique in your deck. And as more cards come out in the packs and in the even the extra cards that you get included in the starter box, you could have a completely different deck, or at least a functionally different deck is what I should say, a functionally different deck than someone who's playing the same faction as you, even if you're using starter set components.
This kind of reminds me of a bunch of different things. Any of you guys play Battle Masters?
Heard of it, never got into it.
The Milton Bradley side of that game?
Yeah, kind of like where it had the mat with the hexagonal tiles and with the trays where you draw the card.
Many figures from them, but I never played.
Yep. We had 2 sets of that we cannibalized for minis, and we also played the game. And then there was that Forbidden Stars, Paul. I believe you've played that one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where there was this deck building element to the combat, where you had your base deck, and then you could in the game spend resources to buy new cards for your deck, and it's a nice little element to add on to some of these games. Is you scratch a lot of itches at the same time.
Well, if on the gateway side of things, if you are someone that just dives deep into the fantasy of the game, because remember that we spend hours and hours making army lists, painting and modeling, changing army lists, talking about this stuff online, doing these podcasts or whatever. So that's how we live out our 40K stuff. You can kind of do that on the ShadeSpire side with the deck building part of it.
Yeah, you can definitely build it towards a theme, and I imagine once we get more cards coming out and more characters and stuff coming out, I think we'll definitely see more thematic type powers.
I wasn't talking about theme,
out.
Ricky. I'm talking about strategy. I'm talking about different ways to win, to beat your opponent, to win these, because this can be a tournament game. This has very specific rules for match play.
Oh, no, not can be, is. They told us at Adepticon when we said in the preview of it and they announced it, they said this is built from the ground up to be a competitive game. They do not beat around the bush about that whatsoever. This is the most competitive game Games Workshop has ever put out, because it was built from the ground up to be a competitive league game, tournament game, that from day one when this thing launches, my store will have a league kit there ready to go. They're sending league kits out to stores from day one to play. I mean, that is their intention, is for us to, just the way Magic the Gathering has these, leagues going and tournaments going consistently. They want to see ShadeSpire going in that same direction.
It kind of reminds me of that. I don't want to say it's the game archetype or whatever the term is of the living card games. I think that's a term that.
Yeah, like Netrunner and those type games.
Netrunner
does it. Yeah.
Game of Thrones has one. Lord of the Rings has one. Star Wars has one. And those living card games they're controlled. So you're not buying booster packs like you would in Magic, where it's kind of a lottery type game. I back in the day when I was living in Athens, for example, anytime I would go into Dragonstar, which is the game where the hobby shop that I played, I would tell the owner, I'd be like, hey, what Magic the Gathering booster pack can produce the most expensive card? And he would tell me, and I'd buy one of those packs. and just it's like playing a scratch off, right? Like I spent $7 on a scratcher, and like that's I would love to play. I literally called it I'm playing Magic the Gathering by opening the booster pack. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But it's not like that, because when you buy a living card game expansion, right, you can see, or there's a list of like what exact cards you're getting. But you still have the deck design component to it, where, like what Ricky was saying, even though we're all playing the same game, even if we're, you and I could both be playing elves or whatever faction, Netrunner, or Imperials, whatever it is, Sigmarines, etc., we could have very drastically different lists and armies.
Yeah, your strategy of how you're going to win the game and complete your objectives, because there are objectives, and you also build your objective deck also, so things that you're going to be playing for, and the things that you I guess will have more fun accomplishing, as far as I know. There's upgrades, there's things you can do to your people during the game, and you have to build your decks around how you think you're going to compete, and I think that's pretty neat. And you're dead on with your analogy. I think
it's a pretty attractive game, to be sure.
Well, the figures, same quality. I mean, I put the ones together from the box set. They're push fit sculpts, but you can't tell. I use plastic glue to put them together, but you didn't need to. And they come on molded, scenic bases. And it looks like, I mean, we've seen people paint them already. They're going to whole paint really well. These things look exciting. And on all the faction boxes that we've seen so far, they come in different color plastic. And so even if you're not interested in painting something else, painting another faction, getting new paints or whatever, that you're going to be able to distinguish them on the field from other factions.
Yeah, that was a good move right there, because just like with Blood Bowl, imagine if Blood Bowl, if all the models were gray and you're trying to play Blood Bowl right out of the box, you'd have a heck of a time trying to get through everything. So I'm glad they did that, because if we're honest, not everybody that picks up this game is going to want to sit down and paint them. But you definitely still want to be able to tell quickly and easily whose models are whose on the table. So I hope that when the orcs come out and the undead and everything come out, they will all be a different color from each other.
Oh, they will.
They will. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, they definitely are. This game, expect to hear more about it, especially expect to see your feeds go crazy, because pre-orders go up pretty soon. I want to say this weekend.
Yep. I've already got my numbers in to my rep of what we're expecting to sell. So I think actual pre-orders will should start Monday, when the stores will start ordering, I believe. So.
I have it on good authority that at least one of the prizes at Warzone Atlanta is going to be a ShadeSpire box.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, they're doing little sleeve protectors too, card protectors. So when it comes out, you're going to have like little card protectors too.
Oh, I bet they'll work for
faction specific.
For the other, like all the different the relic cards and everything, and the stratagem cards and stuff too. Neat. Can completely theme out your whole thing. Pretty cool. I did not know that. Speaking of stratagems and relics and the like, let's do a little 40K talk, if that's okay with you guys.
Man.
This is a 40K podcast. What?
Well, I've been playing a lot of 40K. Been playing as much as I possibly can. I'm taking this edition really seriously, but I also really enjoy playing casually. I played a game last night where I'm playing this kind of, I don't want to say dirtly Death Guard list, but it is, let's just say, a not optimized Death Guard list. It's basically just built around getting Mortarion, fighting turn one, and then whatever else happens. I've lived the dream, and I don't need anything else. But all the strategy cards and whatever, my opponent was using them, and I'm not anti like game accessories. I find them difficult for me to keep track of and fumble with during the game, and completely focus on the strategy of the game. But I saw how he was using the stratagems and the card and notes and stuff for things like the Canicles of the Omnissiah and stuff like that. And I think it really helps speed up the game and make sure that you have kind of these things top of mind to make them easier to use, because we talked a little about this in previous shows. It's going to be really difficult to keep track of or to remember what all 27 of your stratagems are that you have available to you at the time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like one of the things people don't think about all that often, especially those of us who are still used to playing Index 40K, where it's like, oh, I've got 3. Like, I don't need a card to remember if I can do
to reroll
than these. Yeah, it's like, all right, cool.
I haven't even learned the other two. Like when I play Custodes, I don't even know the other two. I've got 4 rerolls. That's it. So the cards are useful.
I played my first 2 games of Codex Guard last night, and it's marvelous how many stratagems. The force multiplication used in the stratagems is really incredible, very, very strong. But to Paul's point, it's absolutely difficult to remember which one you're using when, and then you'll be maybe 2 substantive steps later, like I've shot with this unit, and then I've shot with this unit, and then I've shot with unit C, and then you realize that, man, if I had used stratagem X when I was shooting that first unit, how much better would this turn have been? There's certainly something to be said for when you keep trying, especially because there are faction specific ones. So if you're, for example, guard army is comprised of 3 detachments with 2 or 3 different regiments, that multiplies your choices and decision making even that much farther, because you've got regiment specific stratagems, regiment specific orders, and there's a ton of stuff that you have to break down and kind of keep track of. So any way that you can help yourself do that is a huge advantage. And I also discovered that unlike previous editions, it was important, but this one is so truly deeply important. You have got to keep track of which units receive which order and which units have fired when. That sequencing is so important. You're doing a disservice to both yourself and your opponent if you can't precisely tell your opponent, hey, this unit has received X order and it has shot. Because in previous editions, when you issued an order, it activated immediately.
You had to fire it immediately. That was the
exactly.
way.
There was no confusion. It was progressive. It was like, I'm going to issue this order. It happens. We activate it. Now I'm issuing this order. It happens. We see the result. Now, I mean, my 2,000 point guard list has 5 company commanders. That's 10 orders being issued a turn. And then I have the Laurels of Command. So on 2 4+, that goes to 12 orders issued. And then you can activate the stratagem for 1 command point. So on any given turn, I could potentially have 13 orders issued before any of those orders are activated, or any of those units who've received orders, shoot, move, whatever. That's a tremendous amount of stuff to keep track of. Whether it's 12 or 14, wherever you are in that window, that's a ton. And so I think especially for guard players, and I think that Marine players suffer from the same thing with the stratagems and all the command points.
All the
especially
codex are going to have it. You're going to have, it's too many to have, I think, at the top of your mind at all times during the course of a game, especially a tense game.
1,000%. If you're trying to play quickly, if you're in round 4 and you've only got 30 minutes left in the game or whatever it is, especially in time tournament play, very difficult to keep track of. So any tools you can use to keep those things at the top of your mind, and then to provide clarity and consistency for both you and your opponent, that will serve you well.
Speaking with Horton after one of the games this weekend, and I was marveling at the fact that I got Vortex of Doom off, which is the Grey Knight power that does a bunch of wounds, and he was like, "Oh, did you have to use that stratagem that lets you do the boost on the psychic stuff?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" No, I didn't.
We talked about it on the show, even, right?
It helps. It really helps get that power off.
But then I used it in game 3. But that is that's an important stratagem. But even with the Grey Knights, they've got a bunch of things that they can do. And I was focused in on, I'm going to use this only in death does duty end, because I know my Grey Master is going to get killed and I'm ready to use it. And, so I was really focused on that. And then the one that makes the psychic weaponry shoot better. So I had those like ready to go. That was on a hair trigger, and then focused on, rerolling a lot with the guard. But and I'm focused on playing the game. Like I'm really into it, and I kind of pride myself on being able to make those type of decisions. And I still didn't have that kind of in my brain. But if I had the cards, I would, while my opponent was moving, I probably would have been flipping through them a little bit easier than breaking open the book and having it there and stuff.
For all the armies I play, I've got the cards. And pre-game, I will get out the cards. I'll get out the stratagems that I will be playing in that game and just put them on the table so you can see them. And that really helps you remember when to play them and also what you have available.
Yeah, and before every tournament, I break out the codex and I read over everything multiple times. I try to read over what every unit does multiple times, and I'm just really concerned. I'm trying to be to know what my stuff does and know how to use it most effectively. But there's a lot going on in these games, even though they are faster. There's still a lot of moving parts that are kind of on. The onus is on the player to do them.
The closest analogy I could think of, and like you said, but kind of the onus is on the player. To me, the difference between having the cards in front of you or having tokens or whatever kind of your gameplay setup is, the difference between that and reading the book is the difference between having a menu at a restaurant and then having all of the dishes prepared for you and then looking at the table and seeing the food options. It is for me at least, like, I don't want to have to read this menu and be like, all right, well, I've got, you're at a Mexican restaurant for lunch and you got combination number 11 or combination number 22. No. I want to see what is actually on the plate and what it looks like. And when you look down at a card, for example, last night, the Grenadiers stratagem, I was getting assaulted by a demon prince that had 1 wound left, or 2 wounds left, and he's assaulting, it was like, I don't know, 8 guardsmen or something like that. I was like, if I pop that Grenadier stratagem, that's 8d6. Let's do that. I can see it in front of me as opposed to having to read the menu every single time an action takes place. I think that's tremendously.
Yeah, just having that available, being more aware, it's a different layer and level to the game. Now, look, this is not for everybody. People out there going, I always remember. I write them down. Where the point is like whatever it takes. These are things that will win you games, and having them available to you, ready to go in some way that you can access and utilize. That's all I'm trying to say. And I saw this guy using the game accessories in a very effective way, and it helped him do a lot better in the game. Certainly more prepared than I was, I think, in that level.
Nice.
I mean, not everybody can have a magic like Horton fairy to remind you of the.
I used that stratagem in Game 3, by the way. You bet I did.
So my fault.
The other thing too is
got the 12 also as rolling 3 dice. I lived the dream that game. By the way, everything worked. Like if it needed to work, it worked.
That's very atypical of you.
It really is. But we were both my opponent and I were rolling.
You made all your 3-inch charges?
Yeah, right. But my opponent and I were rolling pretty much nothing but 5s in the first 2 rounds of the game. It worked out really.
That's an exciting game when that starts happening.
Yeah, no, we were. It's all 5s all around. He was getting, 5-up saves all over the place. This is what got me. The silencer, the Gatling silencer. I want to say I put like 13 to 14 wounds on Scabathrax.
That's a beautiful thing.
Unsaved wounds. So that's when the train fell. The train derailed for my opponent.
Seems average.
Right.
That is completely average. That's what a psi thing silencer does.
That is what everyone who takes one thinks it's going to do, including myself.
And now you're going to be riding that high, though, so the next game, when it does absolutely none of that...
No, I'm retiring.
You're going to be really hurt.
It's getting retired.
Nope, we're good.
It is all incinerators
Life goals
from here.
achieved.
Yeah,
you should retire it now. Send it out on a high.
It's all incinerators and psi cannons from here. No, we're talking about the game made stuff, but yeah, I think this is an addition that I think it is finally worth getting those types of things and reviewing them as the game progresses. Because I mean, again, it's just going to help you make sure you do the right thing at the right time. You don't want to be 2 turns past that moment and go, oh, if I just did this. It's not even a list thing. It's not even if I had just taken some other thing in my list. It was if I just did this thing that was available to me that I could have done right then, but I didn't.
Yeah, but the Astra Militarum book, I have never, and don't get me wrong, guys, I know you guys have played Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum on and off for years. I mean, I know Andrew has been in the book for 2-3 editions at least, but I am I was building an Elysian list at the end of 7th, so I only really knew Elysians, and I actually struggle with this book, like trying to wrap my head around all of it, because last edition, you would look at a book and you'd be like, okay, here's the 2 or 3 things that are good. We spam that, we win games. And now it's like everything is good. Like, it is very hard to pick up an Astra Militarum book and build a list and it be terrible. I mean, you had to go out of your way to do that. And
I think to your credit, Ricky, you've absolutely put your finger on the pulse of kind of something that's very unique to IG. And Paul has been playing guard for way longer than I have, right? So his catechins been playing a long time. And
the original catechins.
Exactly.
Well, not the metal. I do have metal ones in there, but a lot of the first run of the plastics.
Yeah, but I mean, anyone who's been playing for a long time can agree that guard are, I think, what makes them overwhelming from a list writing perspective, because I totally agree with you. It is a daunting task to sit down and write a guard list. The thing that makes them so overwhelming is that when you as compared to something like, let's say, Space Marines or Chaos Space Marines, right? You've got a Space Marine book and you've got, well, these chapter tactics. All the core units are the same across the board, right? And for Space Marines, I think there's 26, 27 unit
that's
options,
about this, yeah.
Right? For Imperial Guard, there's 45 or 50 unit options. And so because the scale of the Imperium is so big, and you're talking about all these heavy weapon teams options, which really should count as distinct unit choices. You've got, veteran squads, infantry squads, blah, 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 the special weapons teams, Astropaths as opposed to Primaris Psychers as opposed to Weird Vein Psychers, right? You've got all of these just innumerable unit combinations. And then every time you add in a regiment-specific bonus, it's like adding an exponent to your mathematical equation. And so even as a guy who's been playing guard for 3-4 years and who's very comfortable with the unit choices, it's like, man, I sat down to write a list a couple weeks ago, and it's difficult. It is challenging, more so than it ever has been before, because these regiment bonuses, and then you add on top of that the regiment-specific stratagems, the regiment-specific orders, and then the detachment limitations. Well, I've got 3 detachments, so maybe I'm best served at combining X detachment with Y detachment, blah, blah, blah. Brevity is the soul of wit, so I'll end with this, just to say, I think guard is while everything is good, Ricky, your point is well made. Everything's good. All the options are great. To find that truly optimized combination of units is the most difficult list writing in the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, it causes indecision. It's like I've been talking with a buddy, and I think I mentioned it to you one time. Just what's better with the new rules: a Lehman Russ Punisher versus a Vulture with twin Punishers. The exact same points, exact same shots. So which one do you take and why?
These are good problems, right? You want a book where it's diverse and the immediate auto choices don't just jump off the page, right? That speaks to longevity of a codex. That speaks to people's ability to be unique with their army list. So, I'm thrilled that so much of Guard has been brought up to such a high level, because it leads to more diversity on the tabletop.
Yeah, we can have meaningful discussions about, like, we were talking pre-show, and I'm like, not a mortar guy. Andrew's a mortar guy, and he's like, why don't you like mortars? And I'm like, I like this other thing, and I think we can make cases for them, which is fun to talk about.
Yeah, being able to present a compelling case and then having that compelling case be refuted by an equally valid decision point from a list writing standpoint is really fun. It creates fun hobby discussions. Paul and I have had, we do these pre-shows and we text all week and Facebook message about XYZ. And then I'm like, I love mortars. And he's like, well, you're wasting your time. And all these back and forth and
in some worlds we're right,
points.
On some day
exactly.
and some day we're right. But I think we're going to see that as more and more codexes develop. I think we're going to see better choices or things that become a lot more available to us. Like we have seen a few codexes come out, and the tweaks that we've seen from the index to the codexes have only made some units more attractive.
I'm just excited that Lehman Russes are now a valid and viable option. That's great. If they keep doing that for all these units that are so iconic to the game or to the lore, and now all of a sudden they're holding their own on the table, I'm pumped. Just keep them coming.
I will say, just before we move on from that point, just about the Lehman specifically, I played a game last night where I had 5 Lehman Russes, and they are... I played them as catechin, because I think that's the way you do it, and I ran all plasma. Just plasma Cutioners left to right, all 5 of them.
Interesting.
And on average, right? I mean, it's because of the grinding advance. If you don't move over half, or God forbid you don't move at all, that's the best case scenario. You're looking at something in the range of 13 plasma shots per tank per turn, and you supercharge them every turn, right? Because you're only taking one mortal wound. They fixed the plasma event so that if you roll
now that special rule that kind of moderates the mortal wounds you'll take from overcharging, does that work for the cannon and the sponsons?
Yeah, so the plasma vent special rule says anytime you shoot a plasma cannon, full stop, you only take one mortal wound. So that counts for the sponsons, which you take plasma cannon sponson mounts. And then the executioner plasma cannon, which is the turret mounted weapon, says specifically in its rules, anytime you roll a 1, you take a single mortal wound. So no matter which weapons you're shooting, because of the combination of those special rules, hey, you rolled a 1, tough break, you take a single mortal wound. That is not the end of the world on a 12 wound Lehman Russ. Like, okay, I'll take a wound, maybe 2. But the most marvelous thing is that they did away now. The way tank orders work, commanders can give each other orders. In Index Imperial Guard, it said specifically you could not issue an order to a character. They did away with that language in Codex Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, pardon me, and as such, if you have multiple tank commanders, they can now give each other the orders, because the keyword says issue an order to a bracket Lehman Russ.
Right.
And all tank commanders have the bracket Lehman Russ keyword. As such, if you take a Supreme Command detachment, for example, which is what I did, you take 4 or 5 tank commanders, and now you're all giving each other orders, and you just happen to give each other reroll 1s, right? And so when you're taking all plasma executioners, everybody's rerolling 1s and hitting on 3s because they're ballistic skill 3+. That combination of units means that on average, if you're taking catechins, and this is just purely average numbers, you're spitting out something like 60 to 70 plasma shots hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s per turn. And they're supercharged, right? Strength 8 -3, 2 damage apiece. It was mind-numbing how just absolutely total obliteration.
I like that. We found something we agree on, Andrew.
There it is.
This day in history.
This day in history, exactly. So, but anyway, all that was a fun little 4-minute detour down. I totally agree with you, Ricky. The Lehman Russes, there are some ways to make those tanks super duper strong. And I love plasma, and so I'm going to go with that route. But if you're taking Punishers and you're just cranking out 50 strength 5 shots a turn, more power to you, all the same. So lots of good options.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit about Total War, the computer game that has the Age of Sigmar theme, and then we'll talk about some of the other threats that you're going to see leading into this tournament build-up season for us at Warzone Atlanta.
Right on.
You're listening to Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, we are back. I'm still Paul. I got the same crew with me. What's up, guys?
What up, homies?
Hey.
As promised, we'll talk a little bit about Total War. This is the Total War 2, Warhammer 2.
Yes, Total War Warhammer 2.
Have you guys seen this?
Yeah.
Yes, I got a big old poster of it in the White Dwarf last month.
Yeah, this is a strategy game. It's part builder game. It's part explorer type game. It's a computer game. Obviously, we got ours on Steam. The ones that we were reviewing for the purposes of this show, and I like it. I mean, you get to choose a lot of the iconic races from the Fantasy Battle / Age of Sigmar world, but it's definitely in the old world. Like you're battling across you're not going from plane to plane. You're going across the globe, as it were, battling other forces. And there's lots of elements that I did not expect to see in the game. There's a little bit of there's like a social way you can balance your empire. There's a military way you can balance your empire. The happiness of your people, and they get pleased by different things. Like, so each faction has its own way that you have to keep your populace happy. At the same time, while you are striking alliances with other factions, going to war with other factions, demanding things are being demanded of you for non-aggression and whatever. There's lots of political and social things in the game that I didn't necessarily expect.
Okay,
I've been a long-time player of the Total War series. I think I started playing with their original Shogun game, back, gosh, it was close to 20 years ago at this point. One of the things that has always been really interesting about those games is the amount of detail that they put into not just like when you look at the screenshots, all you're seeing are the big army battles, and those are awesome. But there's also this other element. If commanding armies isn't the thing that you like to do, and you like to play maybe a little court intrigue as an empire player, or if you want to deal with slaves and stuff as a dark elf player, like there's these additional layers that are characterful and matched to each race, and it's a stretch from what they've done before, because when you're playing as like the Romans or the Attilians or all these other factions they've done for their games in the past, there's a certain difference between peoples, of course, but everybody's human, and there isn't this big lore, this big hoard of lore to draw from on what the personality of they are in dramatic and magical ways.
I think when I started as a high elf, there was a dark elf kingdom right next to me, and I just made it a point I'm never going to do anything peaceful with them. It's always going to be war.
And
I think that's a fair assessment.
People, Paul, you can never come together if you start off with that attitude. Okay. Listen.
If you play the Dark Elves, Malekith will tell you every 5 seconds that he is the true heir of an Aryan. So you just need to recognize that, Ricky.
Well, there's an overarching quest. Like when you're playing through the game, there are like side quests and story quests that you're supposed to complete. And I think that was a neat element too, because things will happen, things will trigger in the game, and you're supposed to participate or stop them or whatever. And then you gain extra resources when you complete these parts of the quest. So it helps you manage your empire overall. So maybe you're not doing all that great on the gold generation side, on the funds generation side of your empire, but if you go out there and win and conquer and complete a lot and raise a lot of cities, then you maybe fund your empire that way.
This game that you guys are describing seems super cool to me, right? Because I like my Total War experience. I played Total War I've only played the 40K versions. I played Total War 2. And I played the whole campaign.
Are you talking about Dawn of War?
Dawn of War.
Dawn of War.
Pardon me. I played Dawn of War 2. I played it start to finish the campaign mode during my administrative law class because he never called on any of us. So I sat in the back of the class on my laptop with my earbuds in, and I beat Dawn of War 2. And it was awesome, and I loved it. But there was none of this empire building stuff that you guys are talking about. It was basically you just run one real-time RTS simulation after the next, right? It's just real-time strategy. What you guys are describing strikes me as something more like Civilization 2 combined.
It is. It's turn-based. This is a turn-based game to where you set up all your moves, you do your moves, you build, you decide what you're going to build, and then you click the end turn, and then all the other factions complete their moves, and you can see some of them. If they're within like your realm of reference, outside of the fog of war, you'll see them all doing their thing, and you can see armies like marching towards you when you're planning.
That definitely strikes me as
mad. Yeah,
it sounds like Civ.
Yeah,
you're selling me on the game, and now I'm kind of mad because I don't have time for this.
And the nice thing about it too, Andrew, is the battles are real time. So all this stuff is turn based. That's going on the
gotcha.
The main
but as soon as you actually engage in combat, then it goes to an RTS system.
Yeah.
Well, the Total War games are extremely good. There are a bunch of them now. But yeah, you manage your empire, and then you can fight the real-time strategy style battle, or you can have it auto-resolve with one of your generals. And if you've leveled up a general to be like a 5-star general, then he's probably going to do it better than you. So you can be like, okay, I can leave this 5-star general to this flank, but this newbie over here, I'm going to manage his battles myself.
And it goes.
I don't know. I never trust the auto calculate. Like I just.
It depends. You got a couple expensive units you don't want to get screwed up. You better get in there. But things like the terrain, what they've really engineered it to where the type of unit that's battling and the terrain that they're on factors into how well they're going to perform and how well you can kind of outwit your opponent. So while every unit has base stats, and I'm sure there's some random element to determining, hits and wounds type things that we're all accustomed to, if you have the high ground, with some ranged fire, you're going to do a lot of wounds and break the morale of things trying to come up the hill towards you.
I call it the Obi-Wan maneuver. But yeah, you're absolutely right there, and there are advantages to charging on flanks. If you have a unit of cavalry, they're outriders, they're off to the side, hidden in the woods. Your enemy charges at your front line, and you're in a good position at the top of the hill. Then these guys come screaming out of the forest, hitting them in the flanks, and they're doing extra damage, killing a bunch of dudes.
Especially if they're engaged in the front already. It all factors into how you would expect a real army to battle. Well, or real world elements of what we know of that type of combat.
Yep, as reliably as we can determine, of course. And there's dragons and monsters in it. So I mean, what's not cool about that?
Yeah, super cool game. Hope it does extremely well, and that it one day leads to 40K Total War.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh my gosh!
Make us a 40K one next.
Shut up and take my money.
All of it.
Well, to get comfortable with the game, even if I guess I enjoyed it, being somewhat detached from the fantasy realm for my Warhammer stuff. Now I'm still very into it. I keep saying this, but expect some Sigmar content from us soon. But it was still a very engaging game. Like even if you didn't know anything about the properties or the factions or the generals or whatever, there's dialogue in the game. There's cutscenes in the game. There's all these things that kind of help keep you rooted in the fact that you're playing a game, and there's all those elements that you would have to know nothing about it and still enjoy it if you like these other elements, the ones we've talked about.
It's been kind of great for me because I didn't play too much in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. When I played fantasy, it was always Lord of the Rings. So being able to have this opportunity to kind of delve into what the old world was all about, where I'm playing Kharadron Overlords in Sigmar. I'm kind of new to the new world, I guess you could say, and having this frame of reference and an entertaining way to explore that world is really fun.
Awesome, man.
So what you're saying is to install this on my work computer. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
You'll have a little trouble getting things done until you've built up your force. And then you can set the difficulty of the game. So if you find yourself auto-resolving too many combats, up the difficulty, and I think that's going to be a different experience.
For sure, yeah. I for one enjoy having control over my armies all the time. But if you have an opponent that you're just so outmatching, right, completely outmatching in every way, then it can get tedious and it'll give you kind of a rating of like who's stronger, who's not. My favorite victories are the ones where they've got like a 75% strength rating over me, and I still kick their butts. So
it sounds like driving to Virginia for a tournament. Oh yeah, it's easy mode in Atlanta, so I got to go to Virginia.
So let's talk about speaking of tournaments, let's talk about the meta. Now, we talked about, we said we're going to see some things, and as Codex comes out, if Codex is released, that's obviously going to change things. It's going to change what we see, but some of the index lists are still going real strong. And when I'm talking about like demons specifically, demons from Chaos, they're competitors. And I think whenever they get a Codex, I bet it's still going to be that way. I don't think they're going away, and people like them. This is one of the original properties of Warhammer. Like, this is something they are very vested in doing well. That's probably why they have so many miniatures and get so much of attention, because they're unique. They're specific to the Warhammer world, and they got real strong rules.
I do think that Chaos right now is it kind of harkens back to Imperial Soup of 7th edition, because the detachments, because the way they all share the Chaos keyword, that bracketed keyword. The interplay is Chaos Soup is really where the strength is. I mean, you're taking the Codex, the index Chaos Space Marines and the index Demons, combined with maybe Death Guard if you're bringing Mortarion, etc., plus the Forge World Regiment stuff. It's all of that soup together that you're going to see in the competitive tournament meta. And I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you're running pure Chaos Demons from the index. Maybe you've got a 2,000 point list that's just pure index demons, but I kind of doubt it. My guess is that you have a combination of, if you're going to bring 2,000 points of Apex Predator Chaos to a tournament, it's going to splice all of those things together, and it's going to amalgamate into what is really a lot stronger. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to get online and see the top tournament lists. What are you talking about?
No, it doesn't take a rocket scientist part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't.
Somebody in an email to me this week quoted you saying that line to me, It's so funny hearing you say it now.
I bet it was super persuasive.
Probably a spot on observation, if you ask me. But I played that list. Now, I use just the podcast air quotes. Forgive me, but I played against that list this weekend, where it was Magnus, a Chaos Knight, 60 Brimstones, 9 Malefic Lords, some Renegade Artillery. Did I say the Changeling?
You have now.
Yeah. And
again, Coke. I just took it for granted. The Changeling's a no-brainer, right? Like it's the most idiot-proof auto-include of all time.
You're going to see this. Now, when I say that list, it wasn't played by that guy. It was one of the nicest gentlemen I really have played 40K with. The guy was, like, you would not peg this guy as the guy that was going to bring this list. But needless to say, it was there. And you're going to see that type of list at tournaments, the one I just described, like some 2 super powerful push elements, and then backed up by this wall of smite damage, mortal wound generation, with things that are incredibly hard to dig out because, 4+ invulnerable, neg 1 to hit, spread out with all these like battle lines or whatever. With just now the Renegade Artillery is of what he showed. He had like a heavy mortar and something else, and I wouldn't take that stuff. But that's like 160 points of his list. The other, 1840 or whatever, was just a wrecking ball.
I think the Chaos Soup lists with all the Brimstones and the Malefic Lords and whatnot are extremely good. There is no question that those lists are extremely good. But if we look at this tournament in particular as a meta in miniature, then, all those Chaos Soup lists lost. There were 3 of them there, all doing very similar things, and they all got beat down pretty bad by you, Paul, by some of the other players in the room. And the top table at this said tournament was World Eaters versus World Eaters. I think that is extremely relevant and worth considering. That at the end of the day, Khorne Berserker kills everything if you can get him there.
If you get him there. Now, I agree. That is also something we will encounter here, so it's worth talking about. Now, it's easy to talk about the things that have some codex support right now, but I did want to bring back the things that are still powerful even outside the codex. That's why I mentioned what I did. But let's talk about the Berserker right now, because the Berserker has 3 or 4 different very viable delivery mechanisms, and I'm going to include Charybdis, Rhino, and Infiltration as those 3 reliable delivery mechanisms.
Yes, and if we talk about the Rhino in particular, this actually happened at this tournament because this tournament uses the Warzone rules, but this becomes obviously extremely relevant at Warzone Atlanta. Warzone Atlanta is playing the cover rule such that if you are 50% or more obscured from the firer, you get +1 save. Well, most of the time, guard artillery is shooting at you. You are at least 50% obscured because the artillery is out of line of sight, right? And so magically, when you have that, then if your Khorne Berserker Rhino advances up the board and pops smoke, then it takes far too many Manticores to stop that thing before your Berserkers get out and kill whatever they want. And I played guard twice this weekend, and that's what happened. They just kind of like, all right, here I am, and they didn't die, and your whole army is dead. It's all gone. It's like, put your arms out. It didn't make it.
Yeah, you have to stop those. Right, you have to somehow stymie that delivery mechanism when you're playing Khorne Berserkers. But because Khorne Berserkers are like what I consider the only real no-brainer power armor choice for things to field right now. If someone's dedicated to field and power armor type stuff, they're the go-to. You're going to see them, and they're incredibly killy.
Oh, yes. So you must have something to... Now, they die just like Marines, right? But you just need to understand what they can do, which is everything.
Well, there's so many options. Like I know we've talked about Alpha Legion Berserkers before. And so, but Horton, would you mind running down why the Charybdis is so powerful?
Oh, well, the Charybdis is so powerful because you can either drop it like a drop pod or you can move it around like a Land Raider. And again, you can put a giant unit of 20 in there, of whatever power armor of your choice. Berserkers are a perfectly fine thing to put in there. And so you just have this giant Berserker unit that can get out of a Charybdis. And what a lot of people do are warp timing said unit of Berserkers so it is now 3 inches away from you.
Because warp time is only the target has to be Heretic Astartes.
Yes, so people will, drop down the Charybdis and hop out. And it isn't the good old Fist of Corn days. You've got to be 9 inches away. But they'll have a sorcerer with a jump pack or a Magnus or an Ahriman on disc or whoever, and they'll warp time this unit of 20 berserkers, right? So even if you have an amazing screen, if you have a unit of 20 berserkers that gets 3 inches away from said screen, then they can just declare a charge against everything and charge and fight, kill your screen, charge and fight again, kill more valuable stuff, and you could burn 3 command points to fight again and kill like everything.
It's almost always the right thing to do to charge everything within 12-inch range if you're a dedicated assault unit.
And especially if you're a Corn Berserker who gets to punch up to 3 times.
Yeah, and then move and punch. Now, I know there will be times, I think everyone just thought of a time when you shouldn't do that. Like, I don't know that I would charge Leviathan Dreadnought if I didn't feel very confident that I had to kill it in assault. But there are, when you are playing a Corn Berserker unit, because you get to move and fight so many times, you only get to fight things that you charged.
Yes.
So in this situation, I'm not sure how that you would make sure that some of your more high value targets are outside of 12-inch range, especially if you're getting assaulted on turn 1 while you're still in your deployment zone. But that is something to consider. That's a way to help stem this, because remember, you can only declare charge with anything of something within 12 inches. As many as you want, but the targets have to be within 12 inches.
Yes. And then the Berserkers can do all sorts of shenanigans, which many of us are well aware of, such as, the light bulb charges and whatnot, the hostage holding techniques. But
are you referring to locking things up so they have to, like, what are you calling those? I don't think that we've discussed those in those terms before.
Well, the way the assault rules are written now, you can always completely control exactly the number of models you don't want to have in combat.
Yes. Okay. So
I did it this weekend. Like, it was a single scout sentinel that had moved up to block some cultists, and that was a very good job. You did that. But then I assaulted it with like 3 rhinos. It wasn't me.
I didn't do that. That was somebody else.
No, it was somebody else, right? So then I assaulted it with 3 rhinos on 3 different sides. And then I had a Corn Berserker unit assault something else, but also declare against the Sentinel. So they went forward and murdered something else. But one Berserker stayed back and just touched the Sentinel's leg. And just his attacking twice, almost killed it. It had like 5 wounds. But the Sentinel was still there. And so then the Sentinel can't fall back, and the whole guard army can't shoot about 1,000 points of World Eaters because...
No, that's dirty.
It's super dirty, but that's what they do. Like, that's what's nuts. You can completely control the assault phase with how the rules are written now. And so, same thing. Like, if, scout sentinels or whatever, or, making a screen.
Can I take you back just 1 second? I don't know if you are in control of what your models do in the assault phase for the most part. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, that is the broader statement.
And so, it's a little bit more permissive and not so kind of locked into the way you had to move models around in the previous edition. It's easier to do, but also easy to use to your benefit.
Yes, extremely. To the point that I kind of don't like it, but yes, you can do it.
Well, with this whole locking things in, and we talk about how powerful fallback is, but when you become an expert at locking things in combat, the assault world is your oyster, and what you just described is very creative.
It's the thing, so watch out.
Well, yeah, I think the greater point here is that for anyone who's listening and whose mind is being melted right now, you're like, what do you mean you can just trap somebody in combat? Like, if you're not familiar with this combat, with this tactic, this technique, all due love and credit to Horton, who's a world-class player, GT winning superstar. He didn't invent this. I don't know who invented it. It's just one of those things that if you read the assault rules close enough, you see and you're like, oh, wow, this is a thing that can be done. And it's really useful and powerful. And I think Gene Stealer cult players see it. We see that all the time with Gene Stealer cults with, 20 Berserkers, very easy to wrap a single model unit. Not kill it in close combat, but then use your activations and pile-ins such that he cannot fall out of combat, and it keeps you protected for a turn.
Well, only certain creatures get to ignore the units that they're engaged with for fallback, like knights and wraith knights.
Yeah, and flying Titans. Models, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, they're, but it's a special rule is where I'm going. They have to have a special rule to do that, and not everything gets to do it. So
yeah, precious few do, in fact. Yeah. And so it's one of those things, especially for guard armies, guard guys don't have that. Like, there's no
super heavies or flying things. No, like I wrapped this Sentinel or I wrapped this Chimera, whatever it is. You advance your Hellhound a little too forward. Sorry about it. I didn't do 11 wounds to kill your Hellhound, but somehow you can't move it, and therefore you can't shoot my 20 Berserkers. So especially if you're a guard player, you must be keenly aware of this to make sure it doesn't happen to you. And really, even if you're a Space Marine player, because I have seen this happen on numerous occasions to Space Marine players with Dreadnoughts, right? Dreadnoughts, especially the double autocannon or the shooty Dreadnoughts. You see that a lot where, because of rowboat and all the other shooting advantages that come with those units, if they get hit in combat with Berserkers out of Charybdis or out of Rhinos, etc., lo and behold, all of your shooting counts for nothing if that unit is still locked in combat with a double autocannon Dreadnought. So anyone who is hearing this for the first time, familiarize yourself with this tactic, and then recognize that when you hit a tabletop against primary assault style armies, they are probably going to. And Horton, what do we dub this? We were talking this on Facebook chat. We called this the hostage taking.
Yeah, taking a hostage.
Taking a hostage. That's exactly what it is. I'm taking this Sentinel as hostage. You can't shoot me for this turn. So definitely be aware of this technique.
This has been a good discussion. I mean, absolutely. That is something that you can get caught when you're trying to get cute with your own movement, and that's not the situation you want to be in with this list that you will. I don't think you're going to make it through a 5 or more round tournament without facing the two things we've talked about here, and that is some type of like chaos mishmash with a demon, kind of a demon hold, and then Khorne Berserkers.
Certainly not. You will not. That's 1,000% correct.
And guard. But we did a whole episode on how to be guard. So
yes,
and that holds true even with the codex.
Yes, guard are real. Guard will be there, but we are well aware of the guard.
Indeed. Well, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about some finishing moves.
Right on.
Frontline Gaming is excited to announce that tickets are now on sale for the LVO 2018. Taking place January 26th through the 28th at Bally's Casino in Las Vegas, the event will feature gaming, seminars, and social events. Don't wait, get your tickets at lasvegasopen.net today.
Hey everybody, we are back for the finishing moves. Hope you enjoyed the word from our sponsors. Today I want to talk about just another option, something that you can do if you're looking for a different look on your army, something that is not what everyone else will have. And we're going to talk about basing a little bit, but this is going to be specifically using the Plasticard sheets. And I got mine specifically from Plastruct, but I think you can get them from multiple different companies. Most hobby stores stock them. You can find them online. They are a little bit on the expensive side, if you ask me, like per sheet. But when you actually just kind of manipulate them to do what you want them to do, they're easy to do that with, and you can get some kind of unique looks. And with basing, we've talked about all kind of different things throughout the segments of these. We talked about resin bases. We've talked about the texture paint. We've talked about flock. Don't forget those really cool grass tufts that our folks over at Shadow's Edge do. They're my favorite. That's not even a sponsored plug. I just love those. The adhesive just works. But this is stuff that you can do outside of all that.
No free ads, Paul. No free ads, Paul. Come on.
Well, I mean, look, they're sponsor of Warzone Atlanta, so I guess I can talk about it with freedom.
There you go.
That was a tough call.
Oh, God. You are the worst. Seriously. Boo. On behalf of the world, boo.
I don't mind.
I have no regrets.
They're starting to grow on me. Chris. Keep it up.
Dad level 9,000.
But get a buddy of mine who I help with his figures. He's like, I want to have my display board be like this Colosseum, this arena, this kind of Roman street or whatever. I'm like, that sounds really cool. Who's going to do that? Oh wait, it's me. So I started thinking like how to go about doing that. And I used some of this product when I was making our Adepticon team display. And the cool thing about Plasticard is that it does have a very good design on it. Like when you get these sheets that have the molding already done on it, it's strong, the lines are crisp, it holds detail, it's detailed, it holds paint very well, it just does what you want it to do. And I thought, And I did a little bit of this when I was making someone to stand on one of the scenic elements of that display, where I took a piece of scrap and I stuck it to a base and then I carved around it. And this was like an irregular piece that I came back in with some texture paint to look like it was kind of blown up in that area or whatever. It stuck in my mind as being very easy to work with. Now, this is something we're using. The one we got had 1/2-inch tiles on it. But what I did was put the base on there, traced around the base, cut it out with scissors. And that's where we're going with this, is that it's just so easy to work with, cutting it out with scissors. And then I super glued it to the base, put super glue in like a little, a regular couple of swirls on it, put it down on there, and then just let it dry. Once it dried, it stuck there like super glue is going to do it. I could then trim it along the rim of the base using my hobby knife. I mean, I was able to do, 9 or 10 of them in no time at all. But you can do it in stages. Cut them all out, glue them all down. When the glue's dry, come back and trim them, where you just simply place the blade along the bevel of the base and just spin it around like you're whittling. Trimming it ever so slightly with the hobby knife, and it cuts easy without losing any of the detail. Ricky, you've seen these.
They look good. As much as I dislike having to use the plastic card as the base like that for the whole base, they looked really good. I liked the effect that you got out of them. Where I normally use plastic card for basing, which is rarely, because if you find a resin base that works for you, just grab that and save yourself some time. But I think you can really do some great custom work and get exactly what you're wanting using plastic card. I did it especially on bigger bases where you can kind of get a real scenic kind of thing going. Like Imperial Knight bases, Wraith Knight bases, those larger bases where maybe you want a little bit of what's that steel, not corrugated, the diamond plate, get that. You can get diamond plate plastic card and cut it exactly how you want it and put it in spots, and you can use it to really make something unique and special. And I like that.
Well, and part of this, the reason it kind of came about this anyway, is that some of the larger bases, like a Redemptor base, which is bigger than a regular Dreadnought base, even the Leviathan, there's no resin that matches the design that I'm talking about out there. You got to make your own.
I think that's kind of the main crux of this, right? So nobody's suggesting, I don't think Paul is even suggesting that you're going to do your whole army in plastic card base.
Well,
you could.
What I'm suggesting is that it is an option, and this is something that maybe if you have not considered it before, and you're wanting some type of unique look, there are other ways to go about doing it, and this is just one of those ways.
Certainly, and it's effective, no doubt. I just echo Ricky's sentiment. I have done plastic card bases, and in my experience, they have been more trouble than they're worth. That said, I was doing it for a 10-man Terminator squad. In retrospect, I could spend $15 and get resin bases and accomplish the same thing I was ultimately going for. That's not an option, though, if you have a unique base size, or have a larger base size, or if the resin base or third-party company or something doesn't make the base in the size that you're looking for. And so I think,
or doesn't make the base that you were previously using anymore anyway. Like maybe they just aren't available anymore.
It's just totally unavailable, exactly. And I think the value in this particular finishing move segment is in that what you can accomplish with plastic card is to mimic or mirror or kind of be a corollary to your otherwise whatever you're using on your basing. And I know Paul and I've had this conversation a number of times where the basing I use for my Blood Angels is the exact same basing I use for my Vestroyans, because I want to be able to play them together and have them look cohesive.
Yeah, when the Allies days, I mean, that was a point like on the FTN painting rubric, does the army look like it showed up together? That's not the question. It was like, is there similar basing across the entire army?
Sure. But that was code for, did it look like they showed up on the same battlefield?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that's a good goal. It's a valuable thing. And it makes the army look so much better, especially if you have a display board to match. And so what what I think is valuable for any hobbyist or anyone who's a modeler is to get comfortable with using the plasticard in a basing setting. And because once you're comfortable with it, it really gives you a ton of options. For example, I have a dreadnought. I have a Contemptor dreadnought that when you buy a regular dreadnought, for example, there's the plastic base that it comes with. There's a standard 60
Yeah, it's got the
base.
cracked rubble base or whatever.
Exactly. And it looks different than a standard 60 mil base. So I bought a Contemptor and it came with a flat 60 mil. And I was like, it didn't match the other dreadnoughts. And so I used Plasticard to get a nice couple of raised beveled edges and everything else like that, so it would match the Furioso base. That is a skill and what is it Paul always says, like just that one extra mile you can go that will separate your models from kind of just the run-of-the-mill tabletop quality.
That's what got me down this path, is that I'm thinking like, okay, going to make this display board. I don't want the bases to look like they were just placed on top or look too irregular from the display board. And I know I'm probably going to use this version of this Plasticard as a road or the Coliseum floor. I mean, who knows what it's going to end up being eventually, but I know that I can use this here. How can I work with it on a base? And the thing that struck me was just how easy it was to carve it down to look like it was a base that was made. I mean, it went on, I got the stuff on there in no time at all. And then I went that extra little step of, well, hand painting all the tiles and recess shading in the recesses. But that's a different story. I put some texture paint, sporadically around the base to give it that kind of organic looking feel. So it wasn't like, a flat plane or whatever. It had some kind of organic, these other elements on there to draw the eye.
Yeah, one of the things that I was immediately thinking of when you're talking about doing basing with Plasticard is just when I went onto eBay, I bought it was a pack of Plasticard that was about $10, but it came with several sheets of varying thickness. And I was thinking, well, if you're trying to do some kind of like Roman tile or something, you just cut up a bunch of those different thicknesses into rectangles and mix them together with some texture paint, some glue, some sand or whatever, and then voila, you've got something. You went in a completely different direction than what I was thinking.
Well, I happened to have this some scraps left over from where I was making this other thing, and I'm like, you know what, this would be neat. And I had enough left over to do some test models, including this Redemptor base, a Leviathan base, and then even some of the what do they call the intercessors, Space Marine flyer guys?
Oh, those are the Inceptors.
Inceptors. My apologies, the Inceptors. Able to do that, and then cutting around. And this is another thing I want to discuss with this. It was so easy to carve around their flight stand. They've got that unique flight stand that it's on a little bit of a hump, and then it has that swoosh in it. Kind of difficult to work around. Or at least I thought it might be difficult to work around, but because I was able to cut this Plasticard with scissors or a hobby knife or whatever so easily, I was able to get the exact shape that I wanted, and then being able to just trim around the lip of that base like easy as pie. It gave me that crisp edge while exactly conforming to my needs on the figure itself, on the top of the base itself.
I think my favorite thing about like what you said though, out of using the Plasticard is you can carry that over to your display board. Once you move on and that next step of building the display board to match the army, you're not trying to match up the display board, the texture of your display board you're not having to struggle to find something that matches the bases you've picked out, because it's the same thing. So you can carry it over easily, and it helps really tie those two together. I think that's the biggest advantage of what you're doing with that project.
I think this just has a place in your hobby toolbox of knowing that this stuff is available to you if you can't find a time to need it. I think that ultimately some of the easiest stuff to do is the texture paint, but this can certainly give you some distinctive looks to your models and possibly help you with a display board, which we know a lot of times a display board will get you extra points at a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, we all love texture paint. You would be hard pressed to find anybody that will speak ill of a GW texture paint, but at the end of the day, it's only going to get you so far. A texture paint is going to do what it does, but it's hard to get real creative with Sterling mud.
Well, you need 2 or 3 elements on a base to max out a lot of rubrics out there.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you've got to have different ways to go about it. I mean, there's only so many like armies you want to have that have sterling mud as their base. Like how many different colors can you dry brush on sterling mud to make it until it just looks the same? Now, whatever, it doesn't mean you're not going to get max points with that, but this is just this is a hobby goal of, adding more things to the toolbox. And on that note, I'll wrap us up, guys.
Right on, man.
Huzzah! What a show.
Anybody else got anything they want to cover before we get out of here?
I'm going to go play more ShadeSpire.
I might play some more Total War 2.
Awesome. Good night, guys.
Good night, homies.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks for listening.